Kia ora, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Ultimate Growth Experience. I'm here with my good friend Matias Alvarez, and he's currently a Bachelor of Medicine and Surgery student. He is a scholar at the University of Auckland, which is why I'm wearing the shirt today. And also, he's a future doctor. Hey, welcome, bro.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Oh, no problem, man. So, have you always sort of like wanted to be like a doctor? And
Yeah, I think I decided very early on, probably during high school, that I wanted to do it. Although my reasons have kind of changed throughout the years. I think at the start I kind of just look up to my uncle, who was a trauma surgeon, and mum, who was in her 5th year of medicine when she decided to move to New Zealand to find a better life for my sister and I, and so I kind of wanted to continue that legacy, finish off where she started, I guess. But I've also been attracted to like the challenge of medicine, how it's like a career of lifelong learning, and intellectual reasons that I found have been really special about medicine. So I find it to be like a perfect balance for me between the rigor of the scientific method, which I love, but also the art of just interacting with people. And the science alone I find really interesting, super rigorous, but it can be cold and hard and just facts. But when you're interacting with people, with patients, it's kind of brings its own elements of challenge, and I find that having those two together is really interesting.
so it's more of like a blend between socialization with your patients and also the scientific aspect of it.
Definitely.
Because the stigma at the moment, in the medical school, right, is that, a lot of students who apply for health science and, the pre-med stage, and they just want to get the prestige. Whereas you are doing this for your own passion. You like the intellectual side of it. So is your sort of advice to, let's say, we'll get to that question later on as well, obviously, but is it to be genuinely curious about the medical side and also the scientific side, rather than just doing it for the money and the prestige, right?
Yes, definitely. The money and the prestige, it's something it's a short-lived passion. Once you're in, it requires so much hard work that you can only get through it if you're actually passionate about what you're doing. And so you definitely need to have that passion.
I see. So how competitive is... Because I know a lot of friends who did medicine already. They go through the UMAD stage, the 8.5, 8.4 GPA requirement, the interview stage, obviously. Yes. So how rigorous and sort of competitive was that?
Yeah, so I mean, at Auckland Uni, it's just as competitive as at any other university in the world. Medicine is one of those careers where it's just, it is competitive, but also we have great opportunities here that you don't find elsewhere, like the undergraduate pathway, being able to get into medicine after just 1 year of university, basically, or just out of high school. That's a really special opportunity, and I wouldn't want to be in the States where you need to do a whole nother degree before you can even apply. And so yes, it's competitive, but also there are great opportunities available for you if you're willing to put in the hard work.
Because that's what you did, right? You went in the first year, and then you went immediately into the medical school, which
That's right.
It's very, very difficult, I heard, in comparison. Well, not in comparison, but it's easier than doing the Bachelor of Science method and getting in, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's kind of, you need to just slave away for 1 year, basically. But it means you save yourself another 2 years at least of time, and so when you put it in perspective, it's not that bad. But yeah, it is a very tough year for first years, but it's doable.
So lesson learned: if you're a medicine student beginning in 2020 and you want to get in, just work your butt off, and then afterwards, just cruise. No, not cruise, right? Not cruise. Work hard.
It's still hard work, but you don't feel that stifling competition of first year. You can relax a bit, and
What was it like going into OGGB, the Fish and Paykel building? Because I remember that, that lecture room, which is just packed full of people.
Yes.
Some people had to sit on the sides just to try and read, and that overcrowding. But what was that experience like?
That dies down during the year as people start watching recordings and things, but at the start of the year it's stifling. It's just so many people all wanting the same thing, and they're very competitive, and they aren't the nicest. So it's a very different experience to maybe some other degrees in first year, because yes, you have some of the new and exciting things about university, but also they're very competitive people who sometimes aren't very nice.
So can you tell me broadly, because I think some of the students who do medicine might be interested in terms of the process of entrance into the medical school.
Right.
So the UMAT, interview, and GPA.
Yeah. So there's the two pathways, the undergrad and the postgrad. The undergrad you can either do biomedical science or health science. 8 papers in the year, and 4 of them are your core papers, which are the really important ones. Around July, you do that UCAT test, the clinical aptitude test, which is kind of a form of psychometric testing, the utility of which is a bit doubtful, but yeah. They only weighted at 15%, so I think the university recognizes that it's only a tiebreaker. It's not as important as your GPA and your interview.
Right.
Then at the end of the year, they send out invitations to about twice as many students for interviews as they actually end up accepting. You do the interview, and then they rank you 60% on your GPA, 25% on the interview, and 15% on the UCAT test. Yeah. And there's it's the same process for optometry, pharmacy, medical imaging, nutrition and dietetics, and audiology. So you can apply to all different degrees while you're doing the same process. And so that's quite good in terms of having the backup plans. And yeah, also there are these special admissions pathways. So there's the regional rural admission scheme, and the MAPAS, Maori and Pacific admission scheme. So those are other ways of getting in other than the general pathway as well. So you still do the same papers and everything, but they have their own admissions pathway.
Their own individual criteria to get into medical school.
Yeah. And there are about 280 spots a year for medicine, a quarter of which are reserved for postgrads, and the rest of which are open for postgrad or undergrad. And then there's about 100 pharmacy and 60 or so optometry places a year. So yeah.
It's easy. So, regarding your entrance into the medical school, right? Like, you obviously had the right ideas, the ambition, you had good habits and the routine. So, like, since you were little, did you always have, like, a specific routine or, like, micro habits? Because I think Jonathan Haidt and Jordan Peterson both talk about this. Oh, and for the audience, Matias and I met at the Jonathan Haidt event at the Bruce Mason Center. So we both have intellectual pursuits in psychology, in engineering, in politics, and all other aspects as well. But yeah, what are your micro habits like?
I wouldn't say I've always had them. They've developed over time, and I've gotten better at them. Just scheduling has been a really big one. Especially med school, it's very regimented. They give you a schedule around which you need to build your life. But just having a schedule has been a really big thing for me in terms of, it's kind of a form of goal setting. What can I do in a day or in a week so that at the end of the day I feel that I've been productive, I've moved closer to my long-term goals, and yeah, it kind of holds you accountable to your ambitions, to your goals. And so scheduling is a big one in terms of habits. Another one I have is kind of a vestige of my religious beliefs, I would say.
Yeah.
So
both Catholic backgrounds.
Yeah, we're both Catholic backgrounds. I'm an atheist currently.
Yeah, we're both atheists.
Okay. But I have this kind of reflection that I do, which is kind of a vestige of prayer, I'd say. And I think one of the things that atheists need to recognize is that we shouldn't throw out the baby with the bathwater. Yes, we should criticize the dogma of religion, but it's also tied to psychologically and socially useful practices. Getting together every weekend as a community, as a family, and going to a ceremony, or prayer, for example, is one I was going to bring up. When people pray, they like to give thanks to their God for things that are going well in their life, ask for assistance in achieving their goals, or ask for help in changing things that aren't going so well. And so even if there isn't someone listening on the other end, it's still a really psychologically useful thing to do, to sit down and just reflect on how things are going. What am I doing well? What am I doing wrong? What could I do better? What are my goals? And so, just kind of at the end of every day, I like to reflect a bit and, weigh myself up against my long-term goals and things. And it's kind of a form of prayer, except I don't expect anyone to respond except myself, I guess.
I think it depends though, because some people respond well to just their own individual drive,
yes,
and their own individual sort of long-term career-focused ideals, you could say, but where some people just look and commit to the ideals of God, or the ideals of the being, or the ideals of the piety, you could say. But yeah, so in the medical school, like just basically empirical science, right? Obviously, the education system in the medical school is not, about opinions and perspectives, but is there a little bit of debate in that regard, like the processes?
There are lots of like ethical issues that you encounter which don't have an objective answer, and so this is kind of why I got interested in Haidt and his moral psychology, and why people would come to have different ideas on moral matters. But yeah, you encounter euthanasia, circumcision, all sorts of ethical issues which don't have that rigor of the scientific method that you can apply to them, and so it is a combination of both. And even though you might have your hard-held beliefs, you need to recognize that the patient sitting in front of you might have completely different views, and so you do need to factor those things in. It's not just a hard science.
And speaking of that, ladies and gentlemen, the book that Matias was talking about is called The Righteous Mind by Professor Jonathan Haidt. I'll leave it in the description. So ethically and morally, you will have like engagements in tutorials, or like
so we have dedicated ethics lectures, but also we have like small group activities and things in which we just discuss how you'd approach patients with really different views to you.
He's not a doctor yet, but you will find out, right, in the next 5-6 years.
3 officially.
So what hospital are you based in at the moment?
I'll be at Middlemore for all of next year.
Have fun with it. I can see that. So, like I mentioned, we met at Jonathan Haidt's event, and we both had about an hour and a half yarn with him about all kinds of topics, and he was one of the nicest men, honestly, and he's a very, what do you call it? Do you think he's bipartisan? I think he's quite bipartisan. I don't think he has like a side to him, because he talks to everybody. Right. I saw him on David Pakman's show, like a progressive Democratic channel, and also Dave Rubin's Republican-esque sort of side. So
and even when he has partisan tendencies, he brings them out into open and says, these are my leanings, and just recognizes that other people won't have them.
He wrote the book to try and support the Democrats, and he did not like Ronald Reagan's policies. I'm not sure what he thinks about that now. But so how did his work on moral psychology and his work on so-called because this is sort of part of my channel, because we talk about politics and I do book reviews as well. What do you think is going on regarding the moral psychology aspect of let's say the public sphere, and how has his work affected your intellectual pursuits?
Right, that's a big question. So I kind of got interested in Haidt because I was just interested in psychology and how I can apply that to medicine. There are so many situations in which a knowledge of psychology can help you. So for example, you tell the patient sitting in front of you that they have a certain surgical procedure with a 90% survival rate or a 10% mortality rate, and those two different ways of framing them have a completely different effect on the patient, even though they're equivalent statements. And so a lot of Haidt's work alerted me to just how much of our thinking is this kind of rapid, intuitive, emotional reasoning that doesn't have the slow kind of cognitive, rational thinking behind it. And then his moral foundations theory had a huge effect on me. I guess the whole book, Righteous Mind, was one of the books that had the greatest effect on me this year that I've read, because it just helped me understand how people can come to such different conclusions using moral matrices, moral intuitions that I'm completely blind to. He uses the analogy of taste receptors, where some people might only have the equivalent of a sweet and a salty taste and not understand why somebody else would place so much weight on the sour and those.
Interesting.
So what was the other part of the question about the moral sphere?
Yeah, the moral side of it, right? Because we both come from Catholic backgrounds, but somehow we're able to have a sense of morality, and how, because what I want to do is to go into the political science side, whereas you're trying to do really good work in the medical side, and so I just want to see how that leads to like your understanding of morality, your understanding of ethics, and how his work sort of helped you.
Yeah, so it shifted my understanding in the sense that it opened my mind to the possibility that there are other people making decisions based on just base intuitions that I don't share, and just how ingrained those are culturally, kind of regarding ideas of sanctity, of authority. You know, in the West, our morality, it's called, he references the idea of weird morality, morality in nations that are Western, educated, industrialized, rich and democratic. It's so hyper-focused on care and harm and fairness, and if something isn't doing harm to someone else, then it's not immoral, whereas for example, the burning of a flag, for example, doesn't harm anyone, not immoral, that's fine. But other people might have strong intuitions, and it even occurs in the West in conservatives and things, so it's not just cross-culturally. Just have completely different intuitions to you and have these ideas of authority and of sanctity and why things can be immoral, even though you might not even bring those considerations up when you're thinking about, is this really moral or not?
So throughout your medicine degree, do you think there has been sort of intellectual or so-called like sort of debate-based changes in the last 30 years or 40 years in the medical faculty, or do you think it's just been very similar? Like, I know you've only been at uni for about 2-3 years, but what's your observations in terms of like student reception and lecturers?
Yeah, well, medicine is definitely not monolithic. There are a range of opinions even among health professionals, and so despite the fact that medical institutions might have stated position statements on particular issues, you'll always have doctors who disagree, who have different views, and it is kind of recognizing that people will have different opinions to you is so important, because you encounter that every day with your patients. Yeah, and so the shifts, yes, there have been, but there's still lots of debate to be had within the medical field,
which is great.
Yes,
the diverse opinions and the constant civil discussions about it's particularly medical sort of problems. Like I think when we talked last time at a cafe, we talked about the prevalence of antibiotics and the prevalence of people not really looking after themselves. We could be at the detriment of doctors, but this is something that not a lot of people are really trying to solve, but produce more pharmaceutical products to sort of incentivize people just to consume rather than to prevent, like that distinction between
primary care.
Yes, the primary care or prevent.
Well, this also brings into light the issue that I was talking about before about combining the rigorous science with the human interaction, because the science might say this person has a respiratory virus, they don't need to take antibiotics, and yet the person comes to you, and if you tell them, no, I'm not going to give you antibiotics, they go away feeling like, oh, this doctor hasn't done anything to me, do I trust the medical profession anymore? And so there's balancing, I shouldn't give you anything, but you want to feel like you're helping the patient as well, and weighing up their interests, and so it's a difficult balance to strike there.
So at the moment, you're not really certain about what part of the medical field you're going to enter, right? Because I have a GP. I know some people that have gone in the surgical direction. Some want to do work on neuroscience, the heart. Is there a particular area, let's say, in the body that you like the most, like analyzing the most, or sort of thinking about a lot?
Well, the brain is really interesting to me, but I don't know if I want to dedicate my whole career to that, or if I want to keep that as a hobby. I think I'm kind of interested in surgery, but I'm not sure what kind, so possibly neurosurgery, maybe, that could combine them, but we'll see where I end up and what I like when I actually try doing things in hospital.
I think you could, because since you're like, relatively young because I'm a fifth year student, right, at the University of Auckland, I sort of discovered my own sort of intellectual journey in the field of political science. Like I think we talked about my view of realism, the international relations politics, of realism and this anyway. But I think you'll get there though.
Yeah,
at the very end. So next topic. So like myself, you are of immigrant background.
Yes.
I've had tons of previous guests who come from German, who come from Anglo-Celtic, who come from Fiji Indian. And so for you, like, how has it been sort of trying to balance between your Argentinian heritage and also your Kiwi identity? Has it been very easy? Has it been,
I think it's been quite difficult. It's a kind of an odd combination, and you don't find many Latin Americans in New Zealand. And so I've always been quite divorced from my Argentinian heritage, and I felt more Kiwi in a sense.
Like me.
yeah. But I see the importance in holding your cultural roots close, and so kind of when I came here, I noticed that Argentinians place so much value on family, and yet I'd moved a couple thousand kilometers away from my extended family. They place a lot of importance on Catholicism. It's an overwhelmingly Catholic country, and the kind of social binding that brings about. And I lost my faith, and so many aspects that I lost. And I saw kind of cultural engagement around me, whether it be in Kapahaka groups, Samoan Tongan groups in my high school, going to Diwali festivals or Lantern festivals, and so...
Chinese New Year's.
Yes. And so I thought that these people had an engagement with their culture that I lacked. So yeah, it has been quite difficult in that sense. One thing that has always anchored me has been language. So I've always spoken Spanish at home, Spanish to my parents and my sister, and that's the one thing that's always anchored me, I guess, and it opens a door to reading literature, to watching movies and things, which keeps me grounded in a sense to that Argentinian heritage,
because we're heading more towards a global period, right, where societies are getting more multicultural. Yes. I think that is broadly a good thing, because it means more engagement regarding, like, what works for societies, what doesn't work, sort of analyzing the pros and cons of each. So, as as sort of my audience knows, I come from a Korean background. There's some good things about Koreans, but there's a lot of bad things about Koreans.
Right.
Like, have you been following, let's say, the K-pop stars, suiciding and
not too closely?
Yeah, so there's a lot of like hard work and ethic, but it's gone to a point where they undermine their health, they undermine their mental health, which crosses to you could say family pressure of some of the kids, forcing and trying to encourage them to get into law school and doctor, whereas you became a person who wanted to be a doctor, whereas there are a lot of kids from Confucius backgrounds who just do it because their parents sort of told them, hey, you gotta do it. So, so do you have a mentor specifically for your medical field? Because I follow people like Warren Buffett, Tim Ferriss, and these other sort of dudes that talk about the wisdom to try and provide to someone younger. So if I remember, Warren Buffett and Bill Gates were sort of like the mentee-mentor relationship. Do you have someone like that regarding your career towards becoming an official doctor?
It's difficult in medicine since every subspecialty is so overarching figure to aspire to be, but it's much more people I interact with in hospital help teach you how to interact with patients, how to phrase things, how to act in certain situations, and that kind of personal interaction is what makes me want to be like someone, not necessarily having someone in the media who's achieved great things. So it's a bit different in that sense to maybe other pursuits in life.
So in the medicine field, so it's a little bit different to a typical degree, right? Because at the moment I'm doing a BCom BA, and it's all lectures and tutorials, whereas in your field, is it more physical and practical?
Yeah, so the first 3 years have a mix of lectures and labs, and you also get into hospital. So I was at Auckland Hospital last semester, but my next 3 years are fully in hospital. There's no lectures really, and so it's all practical learning, and so it is different in that sense. You're not stuck in a lecture theatre, which is very exciting, but yeah, it's a mix of both.
Which means that as a doctor, you have to have social skills, right? You have to have social skills. It's not just being in the books and memorizing everything in your textbook. It's about socially interacting with people.
That's one of the major parts of the interview. It's weeding out people who are only studious but have no social skills. If you're just there because you put your head in the books all day and memorize every fact, it's not enough really, or it's not. You don't want to pursue only that aspect, because your patient doesn't want you to just recall facts off the top of the head. They want you to actually explain things to them, interact with them, be compassionate to them, all these interpersonal skills that are so important.
So the EQ, the emotional
Yes,
intelligence bit,
yeah.
the social intelligence bit.
Mm.
Exactly. Speaking of your supervisors, though, is in the medical program, is it like you have to do an honors dissertation, something like,
No.
or is it just supervising as in looking after what you've been doing in the hospital, or?
Yeah, so in each rotation you have a clinician who becomes your supervisor. One in each subspecialty that you go through, so you rotate through general surgery, orthopedics, obstetrics and gynecology, every different specialty. And they kind of show you what the specialty is like, and each year you become more and more involved. So maybe in fourth year you're doing more watching because they're responsible for any mistakes you make, so they don't want to get you too involved yet, but each year you get more responsibility and you start interacting more with the patient and doing more procedures yourself. And so that's the sense that I mean supervisor and not dissertation.
Not a dissertation advisor. I see. Do you have any final advice for young women and men that are watching this and who, like a final word in terms of entering the medical school at the University of Auckland or Otago or Victoria or
if it's truly your passion, just be persistent, keep going at it, work hard, especially if you have this awesome opportunity of entering in first year undergrad. Slave away during that year and then relax after that.
Slave away.
And bring your own individual reasons to the table of why you want to do medicine. If you have an interview, try to be unique. Don't just say you want to help people. Like, everyone wants to help people, of course, but surely you have your own experiences that can be brought to the table that will single you out and make you stand out.
Great. Thank you for the awesome discussion, man.
Thank you very much.
Awesome. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching the Ultimate Growth Experience. I'm Leonard Hong, and this is Matias Alvarez. Thank you very much.
Thank you.